The bridge had stood there for generations, a simple wooden structure arched over a narrow ravine, connecting two halves of the forest. Time had softened its edges, moss creeping along its base, planks worn smooth by boots, hooves, and the occasional paw. But now, it stood silent. And so did the bear cub. Every evening for nearly a week, villagers walking the river path saw the same haunting sight, a small bear cub with dark amber fur standing just before the first plank of the bridge. Its head low, ears slightly back, eyes fixed on the opposite side, unmoving. It never crossed. Not even once. At first, people thought it was just coincidence. Then curiosity. Then perhaps, some instinctive fear of the old wood. But by the sixth day, the whispers began. It's waiting for something. It lost something over there. It's not a wild cub. It's remembering. In the nearby village of Gallows Nest, where the houses leaned into each other like whispered secrets, a young girl named Elsie heard the stories and immediately froze. A strange, electric ache filled her chest. A bear cub? Amber-furred? Near the bridge? It couldn't be. Could it? She'd heard no mention of the cub's name. No one dared go near. But in her heart, she already knew. Only one bear would stand and wait like that. Only one would return to that bridge, and stop. That night, as the village lights flickered out one by one, Elsie sat on the edge of her bed, gripping the worn pages of a drawing, a sketch she had made months ago, now faded and smudged with time. It was a bear cub. With wide eyes, a crooked ear, and a pine cone in its paw. The name written beneath in bold, childish letters, Birch. She hadn't seen him in months. Not since the snow melted. Not since he had disappeared without a sound. But now, he was back? Why hadn't he crossed the bridge? Why did he just wait? Elsie's heart pounded in her chest. Her fingers itched to reach for her boots, to sneak past the door, and run through the woods, even if the night was cold and the stars too bright. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered into the silence, as if he could somehow hear her across the trees and the creek. Birch, why won't you come over? The wind outside stirred the trees, and for a moment, she thought she heard a low whimper in the distance, barely audible, almost lost in the rustle of branches. And something inside her whispered back. Because he's waiting for you. 6 months earlier, the forest was burning with color. It was autumn in Gallows Nest, the kind of fall that turned every tree into fire and every breeze into poetry. Leaves drifted like lanterns through the air, and the air smelled of pine, wood smoke, and wet earth. It was the season of harvest festivals, cinnamon bread, and long walks through the gold-dusted woods. And that was what Elsie was doing that morning, walking deep into the trees behind her cottage, chasing the last falling leaves like she used to with her older brother, before the accident that left their family quieter. She wasn't supposed to be out that far. Her mother had warned her, gently but firmly, the forest is no place for a child alone. But Elsie had always felt more herself in the woods than anywhere else. The trees didn't ask questions. They just listened. It was near the riverbank that she heard the cry. A soft, broken whimper, like a dog with something caught in its paw. Elsie froze. Then it came again. Cautiously, heart-thudding, she followed the sound through the brush, pushing aside ferns and stepping over roots until she reached a clearing near the base of the old wooden bridge. And there, caught between two fallen logs, tangled in wire and bramble, was a bear cub. Its fur was matted with mud and flecks of blood. One hind leg was twisted awkwardly, and its chest heaved with panic. Its eyes were wide, shimmering with pain and fear. Elsie didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she slowly crouched, lowering herself to the cub's level. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the river's hum. "I won't hurt you." The cub growled softly, more out of fear than aggression, then went still, as if unsure whether she was real. Elsie reached into her coat and pulled out the crust of bread she'd saved from breakfast. She held it out at arm's length, inching forward. The cub sniffed the air, then hesitated, before snatching the bread with trembling teeth. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Elsie stayed. When she was sure the cub trusted her enough, she used her school scissors to snip away at the bramble and loosen the wire. The cub flinched but didn't bite. Finally, with one last tug, the wire gave way. The cub let out a low whine and limped back, free but cautious. It stood there, wobbling, and looked at her. And something passed between them. Not fear. Not confusion. Something older. Something like recognition. She came back the next day. And the next. She brought more food, berries, carrots, oats. She even sang once, softly, and was surprised to see the cub edge closer, as if soothed. After a week, he began to follow her, only as far as the bridge, never beyond. "I'll call you Birch," she told him one day, placing a tiny pine cone in his paw. "Like the trees that bend but don't break." The name stuck. The bond grew. Her parents never knew. They assumed she was spending more time in the village library or with neighbors. But in truth, Elsie spent her autumn afternoons in the woods, drawing pictures for Birch, feeding him scraps, talking about her brother, how he used to carry her across this same bridge when the planks were too big for her little feet. Birch never crossed that bridge. Not once. But he would always meet her there. Until the day he vanished, as suddenly as he'd appeared. And now, months later, he was back. Still standing on the wrong side of the bridge. Waiting. For weeks after that first rescue, Birch and Elsie had become an unspoken part of each other's world. It was never loud. Never dramatic. But it was steady. Certain. Like sunrise. Each day, after school and chores, Elsie would slip out with her little satchel, filled with scraps of food, fresh drawings, and sometimes her brother's old wooden flute, and head toward the edge of the forest. By the time she reached the bridge, Birch would already be there, waiting. He never crossed it. No matter how many times she waved him over, patted the planks, or placed treats a few steps in, Birch would always remain on his side. He'd shuffle forward, sometimes put one paw on the bridge, and stop. Elsie never pushed. She would sit cross-legged on her end, legs dangling over the edge, and talk. About her day. About her brother. About the loneliness that grew louder in her house, especially when her parents stopped smiling at dinner. And Birch listened. He'd lie on his belly, head tilted, ears twitching, sometimes letting out a soft grunt when she laughed or sighed. It was as if the cub didn't just hear her, he understood her. She once told him a secret. "That bridge used to scare me too. I fell once when I was little. My brother caught me." Birch had blinked slowly and inched closer. Still, he never crossed. The villagers began to notice. They didn't know Elsie was visiting the cub, but the sightings were increasing. Birch had grown larger, stronger. Less of a cub now, more a small bear. But still gentle. Still quiet. A hunter claimed he saw the cub sitting alone on a hill during the first snow, looking toward the village. He wasn't tracking, the man said. He was remembering. Someone else left a basket of apples by the trailhead. The next morning, it was gone, the basket untouched, as if the bear had taken only what it needed. Whispers grew. "That bear's not normal. It's waiting for someone." For Elsie, the bridge became more than a place, it became their world. She left drawings for him, tucking them between planks. A bear and a girl sitting side by side. A bridge with paw prints on both sides. A house with pine trees, and a bear sleeping beside it. Once she brought a scarf, red and woolen, the kind her brother used to wear, and tied it gently to one of the branches near the bridge. "Now you'll always have something of mine," she whispered. Birch sniffed it carefully. He nudged it once with his snout, then lay down beside it as if it were a blanket. That day she sang. A soft melody her mother used to hum when the world felt too loud. To her surprise, Birch made a sound, not a growl, not a roar, but something like a sigh. His eyes closed. He slept, curled like a comma in the snow. Elsie stayed until sunset, humming and drawing shapes in the dirt. In those moments, she forgot about sadness. About missing. About goodbyes. There was just the sound of the river. And the bear who chose to stay. But winter was coming fast. The days shortened. The air turned sharp. Snow began to fall more often than rain. Elsie knew hibernation was near. She knew their time was growing thin. "Will you remember me?" she asked one evening, as snowflakes caught in her eyelashes. Birch, from his side of the bridge, looked up with wide, honest eyes. And slowly, deliberately, he nudged a pine cone toward her across the first plank. It stopped just short of the middle. She picked it up and smiled. "I'll take that as a yes." Then one morning, Birch didn't come. Elsie waited at the bridge longer than usual, the scarf she'd brought for him clutched in her gloved hands. The wind had turned icy, and the trees across the ravine stood like silent watchers, unmoving. She sat on the cold wooden planks, her breath forming clouds in the fading light, eyes fixed on the trail through the pines. But nothing stirred. No soft grunts. No paw prints in the snow. No flicker of amber fur between the trees. She returned the next day. And the next. Still nothing. By the fourth day, worry crept into her chest like frost under a door. Her mind buzzed with awful possibilities. Had Birch gone into hibernation early? Had something happened? Poachers? Wolves? An accident? Her mother noticed her distraction at dinner and gently asked, "Are you feeling all right, sweetie?" Elsie nodded too quickly, unable to speak. How could she explain that the one friend who listened, who understood, had simply vanished? She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the window, watching snowflakes dance in the moonlight, hoping to see that familiar silhouette on the hill. But the darkness stayed empty. 2 more days passed. Elsie returned to the bridge every afternoon after school, ignoring the biting wind and the ache in her knees from sitting on the frozen planks. She placed out a small pile of berries, fresh water, even a folded blanket she had stitched from old scraps. She sang softly, though her voice trembled with the cold, and something deeper. But the forest gave her no answer. The scarf Birch had once laid beside was still there, now stiff with frost. One day, she left her notebook behind, open to a drawing of them sitting side by side under the trees. She weighted the pages down with a pine cone, just like the one he'd nudged across to her weeks ago. Please see this, she thought. Please come back. But when she returned the next morning, the notebook was untouched. No tracks. No scent. No sign. The world felt smaller without him. At school, she grew quiet. At home, she sat more at the window than at the dinner table. Her parents, unaware of the secret friendship she'd lost, assumed she was just tired of the cold, or still grieving her brother. And while both were true, it wasn't the full truth. She didn't cry. Not at first. It wasn't like losing someone all at once. It was like slowly forgetting the sound of a voice, the way a hand feels in yours, or the warmth of something waiting at the edge of the woods. And the worst part? She hadn't even said goodbye. 1 week after Birch's disappearance, she visited the bridge one last time. She sat in silence, the cold seeping into her bones. Then, she tied a small bell to the railing. It was the same one her brother had given her before he passed, the one she wore every winter like a charm. "If you ever come back," she whispered, tears finally sliding down her cheeks, "you'll know I was here." The wind caught the bell gently, and it rang, soft and hollow. Just once. Then silence. The forest had never felt so quiet. For weeks, Elsie carried the weight of Birch's absence like a stone in her chest. The world moved forward, the village lit up with holiday lanterns, sleigh bells echoed down the cobblestone paths, and laughter spilled from windows like smoke. But Elsie didn't laugh. She waited. Until the day she overheard something that changed everything. She was in the general store, helping her father gather supplies, when 2 woodsmen came in, brushing snow from their coats and stomping their boots by the stove. "Heard there were fresh tracks by Crescent Ridge," one said. "Too small for a full-grown bear. Limping, too." "Same ridge where poachers laid those traps last year?" the other asked. Elsie froze, a tin of oats slipping from her hands. Crescent Ridge. That was near the stream, near the ravine beyond the bridge. Limping. Her heart beat wildly. Later that evening, while her parents were setting the table for supper, she bundled herself tightly and slipped out the back door. Snow crunched under her boots as she followed the river, flashlight tucked under her arm, her little bell tucked safely into her coat. She didn't care about the cold. She didn't care about the rules. She needed to know. As she reached the edge of Crescent Ridge, the snow thickened. The trees closed in tighter here, their skeletal limbs groaning in the wind. She followed the faint impressions in the snow, paw prints, uneven and wide-set, winding between the trees. Then she saw it. A tuft of amber fur caught in a low branch. And beside it, blood. Her stomach turned, but she kept going. She called softly into the woods, "Birch." Then again, louder. "Birch, it's me." A branch cracked in the distance. She turned sharply, heart racing, eyes scanning the white shadows. And then, from behind a large pine, something moved. Not something. Someone. A boy. Older than her. lean, pale, eyes sunken from cold. He stepped forward hesitantly. "I saw him," he said in a quiet voice. "The bear." Elsie blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "I've been following him for 2 days. He's hurt. He won't let me close, but he keeps coming back to the bridge. At night." Her breath caught. "You've seen him near the bridge?" The boy nodded. "He drops something near the center. Every time. Then leaves." Without another word, Elsie turned and ran. The boy called after her, but she didn't stop. She crossed the forest as night fell, snow blurring her vision, cheeks burning with wind. When she reached the bridge, she collapsed to her knees, flashlight beam flickering as she scanned the planks. And there, in the very center, sat the torn red scarf. Stiff with frost, but unmistakable. Beside it lay something else, a drawing. Her drawing. The one she'd left behind. The one she thought was forgotten. And scratched into the wood beside it, clumsily, crudely, were markings. Paw prints. In a pattern. Back and forth. Back and forth. He had come. And waited. Every night. Tears welled in her eyes. "Birch," she whispered into the cold. "You didn't forget me." From deep within the trees, far across the bridge, she thought she heard a low sound. A grunt. Or maybe, a cry. She stood, gripped the scarf, and tied it around the railing where it had first hung. Then she reached into her coat, pulled out the tiny bell, and tied it beside the scarf. It chimed once, soft and sweet. A promise. "I'll be here tomorrow," she said to the woods. "I promise." And somewhere out there, something stirred. The morning sun broke through a sky heavy with clouds, casting a silvery light across the snowy forest. A hush blanketed the world, the kind of silence that feels like waiting. Elsie stood at her side of the bridge, wrapped in her thickest coat, scarf fluttering softly in the wind. In her gloved hands, she held the small bell, now tied tightly to the railing beside the faded drawing and the pine cone she'd kept since autumn. It had been exactly 32 days since Birch had vanished. Exactly 32 mornings she had crossed the woods. Exactly 32 times she had waited. Today, she didn't bring food. She didn't bring drawings. She just brought herself. And hope. The kind that hurt to hold on to, but couldn't be let go. She sat down at the edge of the bridge, eyes on the other side, and whispered the name that still lived in her chest like a heartbeat. Birch. For a long time, nothing moved. Snow drifted gently down like falling feathers. The river below cracked and hissed under its thin sheet of ice. Then, the softest sound. A branch bending. Elsie's breath caught. Her eyes searched the trees across the ravine. And there, emerging slowly from between the trunks, was Birch. He looked older. Bigger. His amber coat was darker now, speckled with ice and twigs. But he limped. One paw dragging slightly. And he was watching her, eyes wide, uncertain. Elsie rose, one hand clutching the railing, the other outstretched. "Come on," she whispered, voice shaking. "You know the way." The bear inched forward. He placed one paw on the first plank. Then stopped. The same way he always had. Just one step. A pause. A breath. And this time, he didn't retreat. He placed the second paw down. Then the third. The wind stirred her bell gently, chime chime. Step by step, Birch crept forward until he stood in the center of the bridge, eyes locked on Elsie. His chest rose and fell with every labored breath. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I missed you," she said softly. Then, like something breaking open, he ran. A clumsy, limping dash that ended in a heap of fur and arms as he pushed into her, nuzzling her side, snorting and grunting softly. Elsie dropped to her knees, burying her face in his neck, laughing and crying all at once. "You came back. You remembered." The forest around them watched in reverent silence. Behind them, the crunch of snow broke the moment. Elsie turned to see her mother and father at the end of the trail, mouths agape, unable to speak. Her mother's hand flew to her chest. Her father blinked once, twice, and didn't move. "It's okay," Elsie said, stroking Birch's thick neck. "He's not wild. Not to me." Birch looked up at them but made no move. He simply sat, calm and still, pressed against the girl who had saved him. No growl. No fear. Just trust. And they saw it then, the truth of what she had never told them. The bond. The story she'd lived in secret. Her father slowly nodded. Her mother whispered, "It's him, isn't it?" Elsie smiled through her tears. "It's Birch." He didn't stay forever. That winter, Birch returned to the woods. But he came back in the spring. And again the year after. Always to the bridge. Always when the first leaves began to fall. He never crossed it again. But he never stopped waiting. Elsie, now older, kept the scarf tied to the tree and the bell on the railing. Reminders of the day love crossed the distance fear never could. And every time she whispered his name, he answered.